Hi there, I'm Drew Badger, the world's #1 English fluency guide, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to another advanced listening practice lesson. Today I wanted to talk about, what shall we talk about today? We're going to talk about reading, writing, and fluency and how these things work together. And I want to give also a bit of background about education in general and kind of why you're watching these videos. Hopefully this should be an interesting video for you, and it will explain a lot about fluency and what you can do, what you should do in order to get fluent, and how you can build those skills with reading and writing as well. Anyway, let's get into the video. So today I get actually quite a few kind of questions in general, questions and comments, emails from people where they're asking about how can I improve my reading or my writing, and also just obviously about getting fluent in general. But I wanted to explain something kind of going, I don't know, it's almost like a tricky topic, but something that has many different pieces, and hopefully I can explain it in a very simple way. I'll try to do that. I might not succeed, but we'll find out. So in general, you kind of got two paths for learning the language. You've got the native path for learning the language, and then you've got the non-native path, or the traditional way that you would learn a language in a school. So the traditional language education versus the native way of learning a language. Now, the native way of learning the language is a holistic way of learning. So the word holistic just means that you've got all of the things together as one connected piece of information or one connected system. And this means that you've got grammar and phrases and the speed of the language, intonation, pronunciation, all of these things that you're learning as a complete unit. As an example, my daughter now, Aria, she is about 1 year, and actually she's a little over a year old at the time of this video. And so when I'm speaking with her, sometimes I'm indicating a particular word, so a vocabulary word like moon or bag or dog or cat. But when I'm talking with her, I may give her a specific set of instructions, and these instructions about please stand up or go over there or bring a book to me or do something, those things all come from, well, they kind of begin with like, oh, look, it's a book, and I'm showing her something, but then I'll use more like, could you bring me that book over there? Could you bring me that book over there? So I'm already from the very beginning when I'm teaching her, she's almost learning the quick way to say something rather than the opposite, which is what a non-native speaker would do, where they would begin with the could you bring me a book, or could you please bring me a book? I'm already beginning, and I'm doing that intentionally. Now, most people, when they're speaking with their kids, they don't really realize they're doing this, but this is how we teach children to speak and understand a native dialect, a native speed, native pronunciation, intonation. So when I'm saying, hey, could you bring me a book? Could you bring me a book? Then she understands she doesn't even understand grammatically what I'm saying, but she understands this complete phrase as one thing where I'm saying, hey, could you bring me a book? And I'm indicating, yes, a book over there. And she understands this phrase I'm using means I would like you to bring me a book. So grammatically, she doesn't really understand what each of the words are, and she obviously can't speak really well yet. She can indicate or even say specific words like moon or dog, or say sound effects. Or if we look at a clock, I've taught her to say like, which is pretty cute, so she can look at that. I'll have to get her on a video and do an update. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments below. I'll put in like an update video of Aria again and how she's doing. But anyway, so when you're kind of teaching a child like that, most people don't realize they're doing this because they're just native speakers and they don't really think about the language. But when they're teaching their own children, this is what they're doing. They're kind of doing these two things. One is explicitly teaching the particular word for something like water or toast or milk. And then they're also using longer phrases that, because they use them over and over again, just become understood as one complete unit. So could you bring me a book, or could you bring me that book over there? She understands what I'm talking about. So there's kind of a bridge between these two things where you're using maybe individual words to teach these longer phrases, but still you're using the complete phrase and you're using them over and over again, and because the child hears that, they understand these things. So this is the kind of foundational difference between the way a non-native speaker would learn and the way a native speaker would learn. So what I really want to make clear with this video, in addition to other points I will make later, is that if you want to get fluent, you have to understand that you have to learn the way native speakers learn in order to speak the way native speakers speak. So it makes complete sense in anything else. If you want to learn how to make money, go learn from people that know how to make money. Don't learn from people that don't know how to make money, that are just talking about making money. So it's the difference between learning from a teacher versus learning the native way, and that's the way I teach as an English fluency guide. So I don't want to just give you a whole bunch of rules, because that's not how the system works. You have to learn the whole thing as one unit, but kind of from a small, simple way, and take steps to get from where you are to where you want to be. So lots of people, because they've learned the traditional way, they're now watching videos like this on YouTube, and now hopefully trying to retrain the habits they have. But kind of one thing I'll mention specifically about this, and this is something I kind of struggle with as a teacher. I know there are lots of people around the world, maybe even including yourself. If you're a teacher, maybe you're a non-English speaking teacher, maybe you know the language, but you are not a native speaker, or you are not from America or another English speaking country, but you teach the language in your country as well. These people can be like really great sources of information, specifically for maybe, let's say I am a native Spanish speaker, and I'm living, I don't know, maybe I'm in Argentina or, Brazil, or I'm living in Mexico, and I'm speaking Spanish and I'm teaching English to my students. Now, these teachers can do a great job of saying well, Spanish kind of has this piece of information, and maybe it's a bit more appropriate to learn it in a specific way. But you have to be really careful about this, because you want to make sure that you're not training your students the opposite way, where you're kind of teaching them to translate in their head before you speak, or before they speak. So I think it's a great idea to have lots of teachers, and even on YouTube, there are lots of teachers all over the world. There are many teachers in like Germany or Brazil or other countries that are trying to help their students or help people from their own country learn the language. But really, they can only do so much before you start trying to teach them to translate in their head. So if you're using Portuguese to learn English, or you're using Chinese in order to learn English, you might be doing it online, but really you're just making the same mistake that most people do. So you can learn a lot of great tips from teachers like that. And if you are a teacher like that, I'm glad to have you actually helping people learn by helping them with that kind of information, especially if it's like one language to another one. But really, the English language, like any other language, it can be taught without using any other language as a support for that thing. So the best really thing you can do is to help people learn English in English, and that's why everything I do is in English. And even the app that we're making now, Scroll Phonics, our ultimate guide to pronunciation, it takes everything that we're teaching, all the steps to pronunciation, all the vocabulary words, lots of things that you need to speak and to be able to pronounce things like a native speaker, and it teaches everything in English. So even from the very first word, the very first sound you get, there are no explanations in another language of any kind, because we don't want any of that information to get into your head. And a lot of people think that, well, you kind of have to use the level 1 or the first level, the native level language to teach a new one, but that's just really not true. And all you do when you learn that way is you train yourself to hesitate and translate, and that's why so many people it's like they want to say something, but then they get stuck when they speak. So they say, And that's what happened to me when I was first learning Japanese. So I would be kind of learning things like, okay, this phrase means this, and I would be trying to translate that in my head, and I would want to say something, and then it wouldn't come out. But when I stopped learning that way and started learning Japanese in Japanese, and then just practicing what I was learning, then everything became more clear, and I started to train myself to actually speak the same way a native Japanese-speaking child would speak. Anyway, so you've got two different systems that are ways of learning, and I really want to make it clear that it's not you as a learner that's either a good learner or a bad learner. It's just the system that you're using that makes you a productive speaker or an unproductive speaker. So a lot of people, they learn the traditional way, and then they get really disappointed and depressed and confused because, why can't I speak the language properly? Well, it's because the system screwed you up. It's because the system kind of made it difficult and actually trained you to do the opposite of what you should be doing. So it trained you to translate in your head before you speak instead of actually getting yourself to express yourself the way you want to in an automatic way. Anyway, so this is kind of a background, but to get back to reading and writing specifically, just when I talked about earlier about following native speakers, if you want to learn how to speak like native speakers, you can do the same thing with writing. Now, writing is a really simple thing you can do by just reading what other people have actually written. It's like native English content, and depending on the kind of content, the way you want to express yourself, maybe if you have a very factual way of speaking and you want to just pronounce everything and say everything clearly, and you're not talking about things like poetry or novels, you're just trying to give information, then you could read books that are like how-to books about, self-development or how to fix a car or anything else like that. And I want you to, this is exactly what you should be doing, literally copy that information by hand. So you would take a pencil or a pen and write in a notebook the actual words that you're reading. Yes, this takes time, but this is slowing down the language so that it makes it much easier for you to read that thing and to speak that thing later on. So when I talk about slowing down the language, this is the difference between you have two people in the front of a car. One is the driver and one is the passenger. Now, the driver and the passenger are typically looking at the same thing, but it's not going into both of their minds. The information about that is not going into their minds in the same way, because the passenger knows that they don't have to think and they don't have to remember really where they're going. They can just kind of sit back and enjoy the view, maybe look at a book or something else, but the driver has to actually pay attention and knows where they're going. So the reader of a book, in that case, like the analogy here, the person who's reading a book versus the person who's writing the book, they get a much different experience of that thing. So even if you read something and then try to write something different later, it's going to be much more difficult in the same way that if you sit as a passenger in a car and let someone else drive you, and then they say, oh, could you drive me there tomorrow? And you say, I don't know how to get there. And it's exactly the same process. So you learn how to get there when you actually start writing the same thing they're writing. So if you want to become a good writer or a better writer such that it will also help you become better as a fluent speaker, then you should actually take a pencil and paper, just take like 20 minutes, find maybe one page of a book and actually write that down. So again, try to pick whatever it is you're interested in. It could be, like I was saying before, how to, or if you like poetry, then write like poetry. Or if you want to learn how to sell better, then write sales letters. Like actually go online and find copies of advertisements and sales letters and physically copy those. And that's what kind of trains you to think in a particular way, the kind of way of the language, the flow of the language for that particular use, and that will help you become a much better speaker. So even myself, I am a native speaker, but I was a horrible writer until halfway through college. So up through maybe like high school, I was a really bad reader. I hated reading. And even up until college, I was a really bad writer until I just started writing over and over again. And I think I told this story recently, but I talked with a professor of mine and I asked him if I could write extra work over a summer one year because I just wanted to practice more and actually improve. I felt stupid in class that I couldn't write better. So I felt like I needed more time, and he was happy enough to help me do this. So in that case, when you're taking the opportunity to try to do something more, to try to add more information, to try to make use of something like that, it can actually help you a lot. So in that case, he was fortunate enough, or I was fortunate enough, I should say, that he was willing to help me out. And because I was able to write more, it trained me to become a better writer. So it's one of those things that like you can't get beyond the practice of it. And this is one of the most fundamental things to understand about learning languages. It's not knowledge that you get and you just put it in your head and you think, okay, I understand that grammar point logically. It's almost like an emotional thing. It's a thing that's a connective thing in your mind that you have to train yourself, just like learning an instrument or learning to play a sport. Because if you don't do that, then you won't actually be able to use it. So I might understand if I go watch like at like a baseball training camp, I might say, or I might hear from someone, hey, here's how you throw a curveball. And he shows me the motion. And I think, okay, logically, I understand what he's talking about. That's pretty easy. That took me 5 minutes, but it might take me, 2 years to master the actual throwing of a curveball, just because I have to watch somebody doing it first, but then I have to spend all the time practicing and getting myself to the point where I can do it automatically or fluently. So fluent just refers to being able to do something without thinking about it. And so it's the same thing with reading and writing. So writing is really the first step. You can read information, but I say even begin writing more information first, but actually copy you take your favorite book, whatever it is you want to do, and then write, lines of Harry Potter or some other how-to book. And that will help you get better not only at writing the information, but at reading the information much faster as well. Because one of the things that native speakers can do, and you can do this in your own language, is you anticipate what other people are going to say, maybe what will happen in a movie or what will happen in a book. We pretty much have formulas for things, and as you start writing and reading more, you get much faster and you become much better at anticipating what people will say. So you begin with writing and reading the things that you're interested in reading. And when you're reading something, typically you should be reading something that you understand at least 80 to 90% of. And that way you can understand all the new information, maybe 1 or 2 words on a page, or maybe a few words more than that. But you can understand all that from context without having to look at a dictionary. So you want to be able to read information that's at your level and then level up to start improving and then improve your fluency that way. So in the same way, when you're actually getting to fluency, you're training yourself at these lower levels by writing and reading, but then you actually have to take the next step of going out and practicing. And this is what I've talked about before in this series about stumbling forward, where you don't necessarily know exactly how you're going to say something, but you begin opening your mouth and just start speaking about something. So this is something I do in Japanese, and I recommend you do in English as well. You might not know exactly what you want to say or be able to even say it correctly, but you just start speaking and you develop the flow of speaking in the language, and then over time you begin developing a good understanding of the way you should be speaking. But often you can get this just by shadowing people. So in the same way that you would be reading a book or writing the actual, transcribing another book, again, just take a page, take maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day and do that. I promise you will see a lot of improvement if you're willing to take the time. I bet a lot of people watching this will want to improve, but they will not take the time. Hey, I can't help you if you don't work, but for the people that do, you are really going to see a lot of improvement very quickly. So in the same way that you would copy that, you would watch movie scenes or watch me even speaking right now, and just try to take maybe a couple lines from what I'm saying right here and try to speak along with me. And if you can do that, you get the tone of my voice and you can get the flow of my language, and this will help you become a much more fluent speaker. Again, we have patterns in the way that we communicate. Chinese has a different general pattern than English and other languages as well. So if you listen more to English and you actually start using it, you have to become the driver of the car and not the passenger of the car in order to get fluent. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative for you. If you have enjoyed it, do click that like button and share this video with other people. It's got a lot of great information in it. Hopefully I didn't give too much. I tend to give too much information. There's a lot of things I want to share because really there are a lot of things required to get fluent, but hopefully you have enjoyed it. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Become a subscriber to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye. To continue learning, click on the link in this video to download Speak English Naturally, our free guide to speaking and sounding like a native English speaker. The guide reveals the 3 most important kinds of conversational English you must learn if you want to sound native, and will help you experience instant improvement in your fluency and speaking confidence. To download your free guide on a mobile device, click on the link in the upper right of this video. To download your free guide from a computer, click on the link in the lower right of this video. I look forward to seeing you in the guide.